I'm here with Danielle for PS22, and why I love Danielle so much is she was one of the early adopters to the impact team model. When the book was published in 2017, Danielle was one of those educators that was all about it from the very beginning. And so I thought it was really important to talk to someone that's been engaged in this work for such a long time. And the first question I have for Danielle is like, what has really gotten you so excited about the work, and why, out of, I think, all the work that we've done together, the formative assessment work and the assessment for learning work that's really illustrated in Danielson 3D, why that work has had such an impact on you?
Bringing the element of clarity into learning in my classroom, it has allowed me the opportunity to see my students always make gains, always make growth, hit their goals. And at the same time as they are learning content and the skills that I'm teaching instructionally, they are developing metacognitive skills that are invaluable. And these are the things that have made them able to leave my room as assessment capable learners.
So what I heard you kind of say in that is, yeah, they're making their academic growth, and you have hard evidence to show that every single kid is making at least 1 year's growth. You're also kind of talking about this metacognition piece and this idea that they're leaving your classroom knowing how to learn how to learn. Can you kind of give us some examples of what you mean by that? I know that we've talked about your PBL unit and the reflective component to that. Can you just kind of talk to the readers a little bit about what you mean by that?
Absolutely. When I think about learning, there is a product, an end product. I did do a PBL unit. It was the first time that I jumped into PBL, and the unit had to do with hosting a community meal. And within that, there were components that I taught a lot about: dieting, nutrition, being mindful of allergies, food allergies, just along that whole vein, plus hosting. How do you host? How do you count things out? All things like that. But the other part, and this was something that we celebrated at our final project, was how did we get there? What are the things that we did to learn? How did we organize our learning? How did we house our learning? We housed our learning in Google Classroom. We put our learning into slides. We kept track of our learning in our notebooks, in our folders, on our devices, just all of the things that they were doing in order to reach the point that they did. And we had a whole component, like I said, at our final event, of reflection on this is what we did throughout each of the modules of our learning. And I feel like that is what develops a well-rounded person, citizen, learner, any word you want to give for it, any term.
Yeah. Now there's another thing. I know you've been really building your own personal expertise and supporting kids to self and peer assess. And I know that that's valid evidence for you, and it might hold different validity at different parts of the year. But how do you use that evidence from self and peer assessment to plan, to make decisions about what you're going to do next? And does that evidence kind of shift depending at the different times of the year that you're in?
The evidence certainly shifts, because in September, the evidence that I glean is they don't know how to self and peer assess. So I hold on to that evidence, and I build from there. When there's one of you and X amount of them, it is invaluable to be able to put them into a position where they not only know, a student not only knows their own goals, what they're doing, and is able to keep track of that process, but they are able to help another student, teach another student, and give feedback that allows them to take action and enhance their learning. So looking at how a student is giving feedback to another student is telling me I'm getting so much information from that. I'm understanding what that one child knows. I'm understanding what that one child is able to teach another child. And then from there, I'm getting the same facets about what what the other student is getting from the feedback that they just received.
Right.
So, and I'm also seeing, is this in accordance with the criteria that we've given? Is this in accordance with the model that we've developed? I'm able to see all of those things based off of how the children are self and peer assessing once that skill is taught.
Early on in the year, it's pretty clear that they might not be that good at it. So their self and peer assessment might not be the most valid or reliable. But like as you move through the year, probably mid fall, you
Definitely.
see that after you've spent time modeling and teaching and giving them feedback on their ability to be assessment capable, then you start to see what I heard you say is feedback becomes amplified within your classroom because you're not the only person giving valid and reliable feedback.
Correct.
Right? They're giving it to each other, and you know that the feedback that they're giving to each other is valid and reliable because you can see that through their self and peer assessment work. In this edition of the book, we've really emphasized the classroom protocol, which would be the assessment for learning part, because we know that that is like the heart of the whole impact team model. If you had to give some tips to teachers that are just kind of engaging in this work in connection to that classroom protocol or assessment for learning, what are the things that you do every single time that you know are pretty simple, but you get a huge return?
Never be afraid to do what's right. You know your students. Children are going to thrive from things that are concrete in front of them. A model that you then are going to go over with the students, ask them their noticings, what are they seeing? And from there, you're going to co-construct that criteria for success so that everyone is at the same understanding of what the end goal is going to be for whatever they're working on. Don't be afraid to add that piece of clarity. I always say, I'm never afraid to do what's right. I know what's right. And you should always make those moves with the best intention, whatever is necessary for the students that are in front of you. Being clear about the expectation is key.
So like a lot of people say that co-construction takes too long. You know, we spend a lot of time co-constructing success criteria, and it takes a lot of time away from my practice. And I just need to get to teaching.
That is the teaching. And I also kind of feel like it goes back to what we said about self and peer assessment. Like, yes, in the beginning of the year, you sit down in September, it's going to take some time. But then again, that goes back to what we said about learners being understanding what goes into the learning process. This is all part of it. Once they're understanding that, it's not going to take time at all. And that is the teaching.
Yeah, so what you're really saying is the time is really well spent, and it is teaching, building clarity of the expectations with your learners, believing that they can figure things out by looking at models and trusting that they're collaboratively going to figure out everything together helps with clarity, and it saves you time in the end. What's one thing that just really sticks out to you as a moment of pride, or a time that you just were like, hey, I'm going in the right direction here?
For me, that would be my culminating event from project-based learning last May. I'm extremely proud of everything that was put forth at that event that day, and it was true excellence. That was a time for me where I said, these years of taking all of this in and tweaking it over time and just continuing on and learning from every experience have paid off. I know that was a great day, a great moment.
What did you notice about the kids that made you feel that way?
They were so proud, first of all, of everything that they did. And they were able to stand up there. Every single child had a part in this event where they were able to reflect on their learning and reflect on what they learned. And for me, that's all I want out of my students. And it was all there.
Interesting that when we focus on that, the test scores come.
Absolutely.
Right? The test score comes when we care about the thing that we should value most, teaching kids how to be learners and reflect on their learning. The test scores just kind of happen, almost automatically. And I think that you're perfect proof of that. I think you're someone that, regardless of from year to year and the goals of the DOE, you've always stayed the course. And I think that you've proven in your classroom that the visible learning influences actually do work.
I appreciate that. I feel the same. And I also, just as an aside to that, on their map growth, on tests such as that, my students all did meet their learning goals. That was not, when they're presenting in the ways that they presented that day, naturally they did.
So I'm going to change the conversation a bit and focus on a couple of other things, because you've spent a lot of work developing common formative assessments that are criteria-based with your team. You facilitated looking at student work with your team. If you had to give pointers to other peer facilitators, people that are facilitating a team in the analysis of student work or any different sort of data, what would be just some tips that you would give to fellow peer facilitators?
I would say your role as a facilitator is very similar to your role as a teacher. Everybody has something to contribute, and it's important that the work is meaningful to everybody on the team. Everyone's input is valuable and needs to be considered as part of the whole. Sometimes you need to come together with your team and create a task that's authentic to you. And that goes back to what I said before. Never be afraid to do what's right. What needs to be done needs to be done. There's no task that fits the mold or something from last year or whatnot. You sit together and you develop what the students in front of you need, and that's what you use for your evidence. And authenticity is at the root of success.
So what I'm really hearing you saying is the biggest tip is to believe in your colleagues, to know that their voices really matter. And as the peer facilitator, you have to think about yourself as a teacher, that how am I going to facilitate this learning experience with my colleagues so they feel valued and heard, because their voice really matters. And what I also heard you say is, when you come together as a team and you're creating a learning experience that's grounded in what your kids need, you can never go wrong.
100%, perfectly said. That is certainly what I have learned from the past few years of these experiences.
One final thing, if you had just wanted to say anything to the hopefully thousands and thousands of people that will be reading this book, what would be something that you'd say to them?
You have to have patience with yourself. You have to understand that we're in the classroom every single day, and we say this to our students. It takes time. Learning is a process. It's okay to put something out there. Look at the kids in front of you, or look at your colleagues and say, you know what? This isn't working. Let's scratch this. Let's start again. It's not too late. It's not too late. There's always an opportunity to make a change. And in time, that's what pays off.
Thanks. I think we all could stand to be a little bit more patient with ourselves. I think that's probably some of the best feedback that I've heard in a really long time. And thank you for obliging me by this quick interview today.
My pleasure. Anytime.